Chapter 16. The Discovery. Chico kicked idly at the round cobblestones of the street and then anxiously examined his shoe. Wetting his finger, he plastered down a bit of black leather that had scuffed up and walked on, lifting his feet high. At the corner of the plaza, he stopped and looked down the empty streets. It was the middle of the morning, but the town was almost deserted. Now that the weekly fair was over, the Indians had returned to their little farms. The only people on the street were a short woman in a black dress and a young girl jogging along on bare feet, a market basket over her arm. Chico moved aside politely to let them pass. Down at the far corner of the plaza, Chico could see Cholito, the policeman, in his brown cotton uniform. Chico knew him well now, for when he went out to play at night with Pedro and the other boys, they would often stop to talk to him. Chico turned down the street toward him. The boy's face was wrinkled up in thought. 4 days had passed since Chico had sold his hat and gone to the fiesta. The next morning, as early as he could lift his sleepy head, he had hurried eagerly to the cathedral. There, an old man with a long grey beard had told him the padre had been called away from town. He might not be back for a week. "And did he leave no word for me?" Chico had asked anxiously. "None," had been the reply. All Chico's happiness had left him. Surely, if the padre had found something, he would have left word. It was certain that he knew nothing. But still, as Don Ernesto said, Chico must wait until the padre returned before he began his search in the towns of Azogues and Cañar. The waiting was long. Never before in his life had Chico found the days so long. The first day had not been so bad, for Pedro had taken him to school with him. Chico had sat on a hard bench with a line of other boys and watched. The schoolroom was large and square with whitewashed walls. On one side, next to the street, were the windows, but even then the room was rather dark. The teacher, La Profesora, in a long black dress, stood at the end of the room. Chico had not liked the school very much. His legs had ached sitting still on the bench for so long, and the steady buzz-buzz that arose from the students as they studied their lessons out loud made his ears ring. Hagen, too, the other boys were so curious about him that they kept whispering questions. He was happy when the bell rang and they could all run outdoors. There was nothing to do the next day. Don Ernesto was away all day selling his cargo and making ready for his next trip to the mines. Tia Maria and the girls worked in the kitchen or washed clothes. Chico even went with them one morning to the river, where they pounded the laundry on large, flat stones. When the girls of the other washwomen laughed to see a big boy with the women, he left quickly. Today, Chico was lonesome and sad. "Hola, Chico," the policeman at the corner said in greeting. "¿Qué pasa?" "What is the matter?" "Nothing," answered Chico. "How do you like our city after those lonesome, cold mountains?" he asked, just to make conversation. Cholito, the policeman, was bored with the quiet of the weekday morning, and hungry too. It was almost time for Juan to take his place while he had his second breakfast. A cup of coffee and a roll of bread at dawn was hardly enough to keep a man going all morning. "It is nice," Chico answered politely. Hagen, as Cholito's question turned his thoughts to the mountains, the words came. Like a stream that had been dammed for a long time and then burst through, Chico's words flowed out in a torrent. "The mountains are not so cold, Cholito," he said sternly, "and it is not lonesome. Why, every day there is something different to do, and there is plenty of room to run. It is not crowded as it is here. When the mist comes down in the afternoon, we sit in our little house, snug and warm by the fire. An old man tells me stories, and there is Chan, my pet bear. I can always play with him, or I can weave hats, or hunt for birds' nests. And do you know, there are big Inca ruins up there," he continued. "I found one, and someday I'm going to search for treasure. Old man says there is surely some there." Cholito was so surprised by this rush of words that he stopped in the middle of a yawn. He looked curiously at the boy's face. A moment ago it had been dull and lifeless, but now the dark eyes were sparkling. Caramba! The boy must really like the mountains, the policeman thought. It was hard to believe that anyone could really like the Paramos. Ah, well, there was no understanding people. "Why do you not get back to the mountains, then, if you like it so much?" he asked. All the sparkle went out of the boy's face. "That I cannot do, senor, for I have come to find—" Chico caught himself. He could not explain that he was an orphan and that he had no tierra of his own to go to. From down the street came a shout. Chico glanced up quickly. "Chico, Chico, venga, Chico!" Pedro was hurrying down the street, his cheeks puffing in and out as he ran. "What is it? What has happened, Pedro?" Chico called and ran toward his friend. Had something happened to Don Ernesto or Tia Maria? Pedro stumbled to a halt and sat down on the edge of the curb, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Caramba! Chico!" he exclaimed between gasps. "I have run all over town searching for you. When the message came to the school, I ran home, but Mamacita had not seen you since morning. Then I went—" "The message? What message, Pedro?" Chico interrupted. "What are you talking about?" "Did I not tell you? The padre has come home, and he wants to see you at once." Chico was already running toward the cathedral, and before Pedro could say more, he had disappeared through the big doors inside the church. Chico took off his hat and walked slowly. He peered toward the altar through the dim half-light. There was no one there. Then, on one side of the altar, a small door opened. The padre looked out, saw the boy, and beckoned to him. Chico followed the slight, black-clothed old priest into a tiny room. His heart beat so hard that he felt sure its muffled thud could be heard all over the cathedral. The time had come for which he had waited so long, but now that it was here, Chico was frightened. Perhaps it would be better not to know. "My son, I'm sorry to have been away so long. It was necessary for me to go to Tambo for a few days," the priest said. "But I have not forgotten you. I have done what I said I would." The padre smiled at the boy. Chico tried to answer the smile, but his lips quivered. What had the padre found out? Did he know who he was, where he came from, who his parents were? "With your little prayer book by me, I searched the records of the church. I knew that you must be about 10 years old, and I looked in the records of 10 years ago." He paused and looked again at the boy, then reached out to take the small hand which hung so limply at Chico's side. "And now I know who your mother was, and your father too." Chico caught in his breath and let it out in a great sigh. He was to know who he was. "Who, Padrecito?" he whispered, his brown eyes hidden by lowered lids. "Your mother was a girl of 20, named Josefina Rodriguez. On April the 1st, 11 years ago, I married her in this very church to your father, Carlos Jimenez. That is why I knew your face. I knew your mother, for she came often to the church, and you looked like her." A great buzzing came into Chico's ears. A mist floated before his eyes as he heard these words. The rest that the padre said came to him faintly. "I found, too, your birth record, and when you were baptized into the church. So your name, Chico?" The boy turned to look the padre full in the face as he waited to hear, for the first time in his life, his birth name. "Your name is Gregorio Aniceto Jimenez y Rodriguez." The kindly padre laughed cheerfully to break the spell of Chico's seriousness. "That is quite a name for a young boy, is it not, Gregorio?" Poor Chico could only stare. Was this possible? Was it true? "But, padre, are you sure? Perhaps that was some other boy, not I?" he asked piteously. "My son? I am positive," answered the padre, standing up and taking a few steps up and down on the stone pavement of the little room. Not only is the record there and the signature of your mother the same as in the little book, but when I passed through Cañar, I made inquiries. 8 years ago, Josefina and Carlos lived near the town on a little farm. They are well remembered, for they were a good, hard-working couple, and your mother, Josefina, was famed all over the countryside for the fine hats she wove. You see, that is why you can weave so well. The good neighbors even remember you as a little baby of 2 years. Then Josefina and Carlos went away, some think to Loja in the south, to be with your father's family, and they never came back, nor have they been heard of since. The padre put an arm across the boy's trembling shoulders. I have worked it out, and I believe that your parents were returning to their farm from Loja. For some reason, which we shall never know, they took that high mountain trail and were lost in the mist. You, my son, were preserved by God to grow to manhood. You have a fine heritage, my boy. You must work hard to be a credit to it. For a long time, the padre went on talking to Chico. Dimly, every now and then, Chico understood the words. There was a mention of the little house and farm, near Cañar, that had belonged to his father. The padre spoke of distant relatives in Loja. One question only was not answered, and Chico was afraid to ask it. But, padre, where is the home, the tierra, of my mother? Is it that farm in Cañar? Somehow a strange feeling lingered in Chico's mind that still his past had not been solved. There was a vague feeling of longing in his heart. He felt no kinship with this settled land of Cañar and Cuenca. There was no answering call in his heart as there was on the Paramos. Where was his true home? My son, neither your father nor your mother came from Cañar. Even Loya has known your father's people for but 50 years, and there is nothing known of where your mother came from. That is the only thing I could not find out. There is one neighbor, an old woman, near your farm to whom your mother talked. She said that Josefina spoke of her next of kin, your grandfather, as an old man who lived in the mountains, some say, while some say on the coast. But it was far away. The old woman remembered it was strange, for never did your mother mention his name, though she talked about him often. She said your mother told her that he had a red mark, like a melon, on his back. The padre's voice droned on in the quiet room. Chico's young mind tried to sort out all the new things he had heard. It was all very bewildering. Hen from overhead came the ringing of the cathedral bells. The priest stood up. I must go now, Chico, but return, and we shall talk again. Chico was roused from his trance by the clamor of the bells. Without a word, he knelt on the hard stone floor and pressed the padre's thin old hand against his lips. Mil gracias, he murmured. As if in a dream, Chico walked from the church. His brain whirled. Nothing seemed clear. He could hardly remember all the things that the padre had told him. In front of the cathedral, he stopped and looked around. Everything was the same as when he had left it. Was it an hour or a year ago? The policeman, only now it was Juan instead of Cholito, still leaned against the pillar. The bright flowers of the plaza moved gently in the breeze. 2 fleecy white clouds, like fluffs of cotton against the deep blue sky, drifted overhead. All was the same. Only he, Chico, had changed. Slowly, the boy lifted up his downcast head and held it high. He stood straight and proudly threw back his shoulders. Yes, he had changed. He had gone into the cathedral as just Chico and had come out as Gregorio Aniceto Jimenez y Rodriguez.